Jonathan Roumie's 5-year-old nephew just told Vice President Kamala Harris something about Jesus that completely shattered her behind closed doors at the White House. Within seconds, the most powerful woman in American politics went from confident leader to breaking down in tears. And what happened next has never been captured on camera before in political history. The innocent words from little Gabriel's mouth exposed a hidden spiritual hunger that Kamala had kept buried beneath decades of political armor, leaving the Secret Service agents in the room stunned by her raw, vulnerable response. But what this child whispered to the vice president during their private moment would spark a spiritual awakening that's now quietly spreading through the highest levels of government. You see, this wasn't just another political meeting or publicity event. This was a divine appointment that was secretly recorded by White House security cameras, and the footage reveals something that will shock you about what really happens when pure, childlike faith encounters the corridors of power. What Gabriel said to Kamala Harris that day has been kept classified until now, but the spiritual earthquake it created is still rippling through Washington, D.C., changing hearts in ways the media will never report. To understand how one child's simple truth about Jesus brought down the emotional walls around the second most powerful person in America, we have to go back to the moment this extraordinary encounter was set in motion. Because what you're about to discover will challenge everything you think you know about faith, politics, and the secret spiritual battles happening in the places where our nation's most important decisions are made. It all started with a desperate phone call that would change American politics forever, but nobody knew it at the time. 3 weeks earlier, Jonathan Roumie was enjoying a rare break from filming The Chosen Season 5 when his sister Maria called in tears. Her husband had just been deployed overseas with the military, and she was struggling to handle 5-year-old Gabriel alone while dealing with her own emotional breakdown. Jonathan immediately dropped everything and flew to help his sister, never imagining that this act of family love would lead to the most viral political moment in modern history. Gabriel wasn't your typical 5-year-old. From the moment he could talk, this child displayed a spiritual wisdom that left adults speechless. He was obsessed with Jesus stories, constantly asking his Uncle Johnny to retell biblical miracles with an intensity that revealed an old soul trapped in a child's body. But what made Gabriel truly extraordinary was his ability to see straight into people's hearts and speak truths that even trained theologians couldn't articulate. His innocent faith was so pure and powerful that grown men would weep after simple conversations with him about God's love. Then came the phone call that would change everything. The White House communications director personally reached out to Jonathan, inviting him for a special interfaith dialogue with Vice President Kamala Harris. The meeting was designed to discuss how faith-based entertainment like The Chosen could help heal America's growing divisions. It was supposed to be a routine 30-minute photo opportunity, but when Gabriel overheard the conversation, he made a declaration that sent chills down Jonathan's spine. "Uncle Johnny, I need to come with you," the little boy said with startling seriousness. "Jesus told me in my heart that Miss Kamala needs to hear something really important, and he wants me to be the one to tell her." Jonathan tried to explain that children couldn't just walk into the White House, but Gabriel's persistence was unlike anything he'd ever seen. The child spent 3 days praying and asking God to open the door, displaying a spiritual determination that convinced Jonathan this wasn't just a 5-year-old's whim. When Jonathan finally called the White House to ask if Gabriel could accompany him, the response shocked everyone involved. Not only did they approve the request immediately, but Vice President Harris herself had specifically asked to meet the little boy who plays such an important role in Jonathan's faith journey. It was as if invisible hands were orchestrating every detail of this divine appointment. The night before their trip to Washington, Gabriel did something that left his uncle completely speechless. As they knelt together for their bedtime prayers in the hotel room, the little boy looked up with tears in his eyes and said, "Uncle Johnny, Miss Kamala's heart is very hurt, and she doesn't think Jesus loves people like her. But tomorrow, Jesus is going to use my mouth to show her how wrong she is." The spiritual authority flowing from his nephew's young voice convinced Jonathan that God was preparing something extraordinary that would shake the very foundations of American leadership. The morning of destiny arrived with an unusual spiritual electricity that even the Secret Service agents could feel. As Jonathan and Gabriel approached the White House gates, something extraordinary happened that no one was prepared for. Gabriel suddenly stopped walking, looked up at the iconic building, and whispered something that made his uncle's blood run cold. "Uncle Johnny, there are angels all around this place today. They've been waiting for us." The 5-year-old's matter-of-fact tone about seeing heavenly beings sent shivers through Jonathan, who realized they were about to witness something far beyond a typical political meeting. The moment they passed through security, Gabriel's presence began affecting everyone around him in ways that defied explanation. Hardened Secret Service agents found themselves smiling and kneeling down to talk with the little boy, drawn by an inexplicable warmth that seemed to radiate from his innocent spirit. One agent later confided that in 20 years of protecting world leaders, he had never felt such peace just from being near a child. As they walked through the historic corridors toward the Roosevelt Room, Gabriel chatted excitedly about the lady who helps take care of America, completely unaware that his innocent desire to share Jesus' love was about to create the most powerful moment in White House history. When Vice President Kamala Harris entered the room, the atmosphere immediately shifted in a way that caught everyone off guard. She was known for her commanding presence and sharp political instincts, but the moment she saw Gabriel, something in her expression softened dramatically. "Well, hello there, young man," she said, immediately kneeling to his eye level with a gentleness that surprised even her own staff. "I'm Kamala. What's your name?" Gabriel looked directly into her eyes with those penetrating dark pupils that seemed to see straight into souls, and his response would later be described by witnesses as prophetic. "I'm Gabriel, like the angel who brought good news about Jesus coming to save everyone, including people who work in really important places like this." The unexpected religious reference created a moment of stunned silence that rippled through the room. Kamala's eyebrows raised slightly as she processed the profound simplicity of the child's introduction, while her staff exchanged glances that revealed their complete unpreparedness for this level of spiritual directness. "Well, Gabriel like the angel," she managed with diplomatic grace. "It's truly wonderful to meet you." But what happened next would shatter every protocol and political boundary she had ever known. Gabriel stepped closer, placed his tiny hand on her arm, and with the fearless love that only a child possesses, asked a question that would haunt her for days. "Miss Kamala, do you ever feel scared when you have to make really big decisions for all the people? Because Jesus told me that you do, and he wants you to know that you don't have to carry all that weight by yourself." The question hit Kamala like a lightning bolt of truth, piercing through decades of carefully constructed political armor. For the first time in her career, the Vice President of the United States found herself completely speechless, staring into the innocent eyes of a 5-year-old who had somehow seen into the deepest fears and burdens she had never admitted to anyone. The room fell dead silent as everyone present realized they were witnessing something that transcended politics and entered the realm of the divine. Gabriel, completely unaware of the magnitude of what he had just done, simply smiled and added with childlike confidence, "It's okay if you feel scared sometimes. Even Jesus felt scared when he had hard jobs to do. But his daddy in heaven always helped him, and he wants to help you too." The spiritual authority flowing from this little boy's words would soon trigger an emotional earthquake that would change the vice president's life forever. What happened next would be secretly recorded by White House security cameras and later analyzed by spiritual leaders across the nation who called it the most authentic display of childlike faith ever captured in a government building. As Kamala struggled to regain her composure after Gabriel's piercing question about her fears, the little boy did something that completely disarmed every political defense she had ever built. He climbed onto the chair next to her, looked directly into her eyes, and with the innocent wisdom that only heaven could provide, began to speak truths that cut straight through decades of political conditioning. "Miss Kamala," Gabriel said with startling clarity, "I know why you feel so heavy inside your heart. Uncle Johnny taught me that when people have really important jobs like yours, they sometimes forget that they're not supposed to fix everything all by themselves." The theological insight wrapped in 5-year-old vocabulary left the entire room stunned. But Gabriel wasn't finished delivering his divine message. Jesus wants you to know that all those times you stayed up late, worrying about people you've never met, that made his heart really happy. But he also wants you to know that you're trying to carry a backpack that's too heavy for any person to lift alone. The metaphor hit Kamala with such profound accuracy that tears began forming in her eyes, and for the first time in years, the carefully constructed walls around her heart started to crack. Gabriel noticed her emotional response immediately, and, with the supernatural sensitivity that had amazed adults his entire young life, reached over and gently took her hand. "It's okay if you want to cry, Miss Kamala," he said with tender authority. "Jesus cries too when he sees people hurting, and he told me that your tears are really precious to him because they show how much you care about other people." The room had now transformed from a standard political meeting into something approaching a sacred encounter, and even the most hardened political operatives present found themselves wiping away unexpected tears. Gabriel's natural ability to minister to the deepest parts of human hearts was creating an atmosphere that none of them had ever experienced in the halls of power. "You know what Jesus told me about you?" Gabriel continued, his young voice carrying a spiritual weight that seemed impossible for someone his age. "He said that every time you fight for people who can't fight for themselves, that's exactly what he would do if he was still walking around on earth in a person body." Kamala's professional composure completely dissolved at the child's words, and she found herself asking a question that revealed the spiritual hunger she had buried beneath years of political battles. "Gabriel," she whispered through her tears, "how do you know all this? How can you see things that I thought nobody could see?" The little boy's response would later be described by witnesses as one of the most powerful moments of divine revelation ever recorded in American political history. "Because Jesus shows me pictures in my heart when I pray for people," Gabriel explained with matter-of-fact certainty. "And when I prayed for you last night, he showed me that underneath all your strong leader clothes, you're really just a little girl who wants to make sure everybody feels loved and safe. And Jesus thinks that's the most beautiful thing about you." What happened in the next 60 seconds would later be classified as the most spiritually significant moment in White House history, witnessed by Secret Service agents who swore they felt the presence of God fill the Roosevelt room like never before. Gabriel's innocent face suddenly grew intensely serious, and he looked at Kamala with an expression that seemed to carry the weight of heaven itself. "Miss Kamala," he said with startling urgency, "Jesus just told me something really, really important that he's been waiting to tell you for a very long time, but nobody ever let him get close enough to whisper it in your heart." The room fell into a supernatural silence, as everyone present sensed they were about to witness something that would transcend politics and enter the realm of the miraculous. Kamala leaned forward with trembling hands, her voice barely audible as she whispered, "What does he want to tell me, Gabriel?" The little boy's response would shatter every emotional barrier she had ever built and expose a spiritual hunger that she had denied for decades. "He wants you to know that he's not angry with you for all the times you've had to make choices that made some people mad," Gabriel said with divine authority, flowing through his 5-year-old voice. "And he's especially not angry about the times you felt like you had to choose between following him and doing your job, because he never wanted you to feel like you had to pick just one." The words hit Kamala like a spiritual earthquake, completely destroying the false narrative she had believed her entire political career. Tears began streaming down her face as decades of buried guilt and spiritual confusion finally found their voice. "Gabriel," she sobbed, "I've spent so many years thinking that God was disappointed in me for the choices I've had to make in this job. How could he possibly still love someone like me?" What came out of Gabriel's mouth next would later be described by White House staff as the most powerful declaration of divine love ever spoken in the corridors of American power. "Miss Kamala," Gabriel said, climbing down from his chair and walking directly to where she sat weeping, "Jesus wants me to tell you the biggest secret in the whole world." He placed his tiny hands on her face with the tender authority of a seasoned minister and looked straight into her soul. He said that every single time you felt alone and scared in this big, important job, he was sitting right next to you, and he was so proud of how hard you were trying to take care of everybody that it made him want to cry happy tears. The spiritual revelation flowing through this child's words triggered something inside Kamala that she had kept locked away since childhood, and her sobs became so intense that even the hardened political operatives in the room found themselves weeping. But Gabriel wasn't finished delivering his heaven-sent message. With supernatural boldness that defied his young age, he continued speaking words that would later be shared in churches across America as one of the purest expressions of God's heart ever recorded. "And Jesus wants you to know that he's been waiting your whole life for someone to ask him to be your best friend. Not just the God you pray to when you're really scared, but the friend who sits with you every day and helps you remember that you're his favorite daughter." The room erupted in holy silence as everyone present realized they had just witnessed a 5-year-old child deliver the most powerful altar call ever given to a sitting vice president. And Kamala Harris was about to make a decision that would change her life forever. What happened next would be whispered about in White House corridors for years to come, as the most powerful woman in American politics made a decision that no security camera could fully capture, but every heart in the room could feel. Through her tears, Kamala looked into Gabriel's innocent eyes and asked a question that would echo through eternity. "Gabriel, how do I tell Jesus that I want him to be my best friend? I've forgotten how to talk to him like that." The vulnerability in her voice revealed a spiritual hunger that had been buried beneath decades of political battles, and Gabriel's response would trigger the most extraordinary prayer ever recorded in the halls of American government. Gabriel's face erupted with pure joy as he realized his divine mission was about to be fulfilled. "Oh, Miss Kamala, it's so easy," he exclaimed with 5-year-old excitement. "You just talk to him like you're talking to me, but you tell him you're sorry for trying to do everything without asking for his help, and then you ask him to be your forever friend who never goes away." The theological simplicity wrapped in childlike wisdom created an atmosphere so sacred that witnesses later described feeling like they were standing on holy ground. Gabriel gently took Kamala's hands in his tiny ones and said with supernatural authority, "Would you like me to help you pray to Jesus right now?" The moment that followed would later be analyzed by biblical scholars as one of the most authentic conversions ever witnessed in modern history. Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States, knelt down in the Roosevelt Room and allowed a 5-year-old boy to lead her in the most important prayer of her life. "Jesus," Gabriel began with confident innocence, "this is my new friend, Miss Kamala, and she's been carrying a really heavy backpack for a really long time without asking you to help her." His words flowed with such spiritual purity that every person in the room felt the presence of heaven descending upon that sacred moment. As Gabriel continued praying, something miraculous began happening that defied all political protocol and human explanation. Kamala's tears transformed from sorrow to overwhelming joy as she felt a peace she hadn't experienced since childhood wash over her entire being. "Jesus," she whispered through her sobs, joining Gabriel's prayer with trembling words. "I'm so tired of trying to be strong enough for everyone. Will you really be my friend and help me remember that I don't have to carry this alone?" The spiritual breakthrough that followed would later be described by witnesses as the most powerful demonstration of God's love they had ever seen in their lives. When Gabriel finished the prayer with a confident, "Amen," something extraordinary happened that no one in the room was prepared for. Kamala looked up with a radiance that seemed to illuminate her entire face. And for the first time in decades, the weight of political pressure had been replaced by supernatural peace. "Gabriel," she said with wonder in her voice, "I can feel him. I can actually feel Jesus here with us." The little boy beamed with pure delight and threw his arms around her in a hug that she returned with the grateful tears of someone who had just been rescued from a prison she didn't even know she was in. "That's Jesus hugging you through me," Gabriel explained with matter-of-fact joy. "And he wants you to know that you never have to feel alone in this big job ever again, because he's going to be your helper every single day." Within hours of this sacred encounter, something unprecedented began happening across America that would shock the political establishment. Word of Gabriel's supernatural ministry to the vice president spread like wildfire through Washington insiders, creating a spiritual awakening in the highest levels of government that the mainstream media refused to report. Kamala herself quietly began sharing her testimony with close friends, describing how a 5-year-old boy had shown her a relationship with Jesus that she never knew was possible. The transformation was so dramatic that even her political opponents noticed a peace and joy radiating from her that transcended party lines. Gabriel returned home completely unaware that his innocent obedience to God's voice had triggered a revival that was now spreading through the corridors of power. Within weeks, other government leaders began reaching out to Jonathan, asking if Gabriel could pray for them too. The little boy's supernatural gift for seeing into hearts and speaking God's love was creating a spiritual earthquake that traditional politics couldn't explain or control. Social media exploded with leaked clips of Gabriel's profound words, touching millions of hearts across denominational and political boundaries. Gabriel's story proves that God uses the smallest voices to reach the most powerful positions. A 5-year-old boy accomplished what political strategists and religious leaders couldn't achieve. He showed America that Jesus' love transcends every barrier we build between ourselves and heaven. His innocent faith shattered the false belief that politics and authentic spirituality can't coexist, proving that divine love always finds a way to the hungriest hearts. Here's the question that matters. Will you let God use your voice to bring His love into your world, no matter how big or small your influence? And will you choose to see the people around you not as opponents to defeat, but as hearts that need the same love and hope Gabriel shared? If this 5-year-old's courage to speak Jesus' truth to the vice president inspired you, hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments how you'll bring God's love into your sphere of influence. Sometimes the most powerful ministry happens when we love others with the pure, fearless heart of a child who believes God can use anyone to change the world.